Cool, man. Well, all right. Besides us, what has been catching your attention? This is a section we haven't talked about since we had so many guests on lately, right? So, what's been kind of catching your attention lately?
Yeah. So, I would say this is kind of like an inception moment. It's like a podcast talking about another podcast.
Getting meta.
So Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla, SolarBox, SpaceX.
Boring. Once PayPal.
Yeah.
Or he was involved with PayPal at some point, right?
Let's just say some, paradigm changing companies. Was on the Joe Rogan podcast. I want to say a week or two from when we're recording this podcast.
I would normally say link it, but we definitely don't.
Yeah.
We don't need to send any more traffic to that guy. He's going to get it regardless. So,
and so it was an amazing podcast. And you and I have talked about it in the office. Like we say it's probably the best podcast of the century, right? Like,
where's that mind blow emoji?
Yeah. But I think that the thing that's caught my attention with that podcast is the content is amazing. Like just getting to see him smoke a blunt on there, drink whiskey. And that was one part of it. But the part that actually caught my mind as a marketer and a content creator is...
And as an entrepreneur.
Right? Was how the podcast platform has just gotten so much deeper and, dare I say, just 100 times better than all of our traditional sort of media formats. And when I say that, I'm talking about like talk radio. I'm talking about the talking heads on CNN and Fox News and all that stuff.
Satellite radio.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's all sponsorship driven.
Exactly. And, you would have never seen Elon Musk sit down and chop it up for 3 hours with Charlie Rose. You know what I mean?
Right.
Or, when you...
Anderson Cooper.
Right. No, and the thing is, the format that a lot of these companies uses, they have a 1 hour segment at best. Right. Like Don Lemon. He's one of the lead anchors on CNN. He's got a 1 hour segment. They would never dedicate a full hour of that to just letting Elon Musk talk. And even if they would probably put like 30 fucking talking heads on there to like
not
argue.
To mention commercial breaks and whatever
so
else.
Then it cuts down to like 42 minutes or whatever that time becomes, right? And it's interesting because, I think Elon, and it's funny that I call him Elon, he's my fucking buddy or something.
Mr. Musk.
But that's also another way. Is like we have that kind of connection to him in a way that he was so candid that you can kind of feel.
He's like a regular Twitter, he's a regular dude. I mean, minus the genius, but
but it just got me thinking, I just came back from London. I spent some time there for the very first time, and I was watching BBC, and they were sort of talking about how these distribution channels for media have just completely changed the game, and what I mean by that is that you now have a platform where you can get a lot deeper with a specific issue or a topic or a story for that matter, right? And it's that sort of Netflix effect.
Serial was a great example.
Exactly. And that whole idea of like episodic storytelling, right? So you can break it up into multiple 30-minute episodes, or you can do one epic 3-hour thing on Joe Rogan. And when I was listening to that podcast, I was just like, you know what? Like the reason why a guy like Elon Musk, is so candid and is actually just putting himself out there, like I said, drinking, smoking weed, is that he can probably just sit down and just talk about mundane things, maybe that may be mundane to him, but present another side of his personality that you couldn't do on a CNN with 20 different people.
Well, I think actually it was, I think the topics he talked about are things that he wants to talk about.
Yeah.
He wants to talk about AI and how it's going to destroy the world or, whatever his views on the future.
Yeah.
And, he doesn't want to talk about why are the stock prices falling at Tesla? Why can't they deliver more? Why are they spending so much on SpaceX when it's going nowhere? Whatever else that CNN or all these other places want to talk about.
And for those who don't know, as a CEO of a public company, you have to give quarterly reports to your shareholders, and he fucking hates doing that. And there was that whole controversy about him taking the company private when he kind of went off base and tweeted about taking the company private. I think that's a big reason why he wanted to, is because he didn't want to have to answer to CNBC or all these talking heads and all these people in the media. And I think, he saw that as a platform where he could present a different side of himself in a safer environment. Because I think Joe Rogan, and all the credit to him, I think this is why he's built such a great platform, is that he really knows how to balance the types of questions he asks. Right. So like he'll bring on people who are super conservative or super liberal, but ask them questions that make them squirm a little bit. Right. Do you know what I mean? But it's also very respectful to him. And I think like being able to create that in that safe sort of space environment where it's unedited, right? Yep. Like what you see is what you get. Maybe they do a little bit of editing, getting the camera angles and the intro and the outro, but the whole thing is unscripted.
It's pretty unedited.
Yeah, right. And I know a lot of people are hesitant to get on camera with some of the bigger networks, especially when they're edited, because your shit can be taken so far out of context, right?
Well, then they chop it down into those 15-second social media clips.
Exactly. And which
they do it in sports every day,
exactly. Which is, it's, like people will say what they say about Donald Trump, but at the same time, like this idea of like fake news.
Yeah. It's pretty spot on.
There's some truth to it, right? I mean, I think the big media itself has kind of created and almost been its own worst enemy.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Because of the business model and the advertising model. But with podcasts, man, it's like
it's raw.
It's raw, man. You don't.
It's funny because it's what Sirius and XM really tried to sell themselves on when they first came out. That was a big reason Howard Stern jumped to that, right? Because he could be raw and unedited. But in a way, it's still agenda driven because they have sponsorship.
There's always so many amount of channels.
There's shareholders, right?
There's always so many amount of channels.
Exactly. So there's inventory, right? So things where like a podcast like this, where it's open format, like if one person listens, if 2,000 people listen, like we don't care. We're just going to talk about the shit we want to talk about.
For sure.
Without, an agenda. And I think that like Joe Rogan is the best example of that.
And again, he has a little nicer studio. He's got some nicer equipment than we do, but it cost him exactly the same as what it cost us
for distribution.
Distribution, right? So when I heard that podcast, I was obviously like blown away. And that guy when he started talking about like if you want to build a flying car, it's just not going to work because your fucking neighbor is going to like hate your guts.
It's funny.
It's like, that actually makes all sense.
Not every car is going to be a DeLorean.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It's funny. I always think about when because if anybody knows me out there, Back to the Future 2 is like my favorite movie. So I've always wanted a flying DeLorean. But the thought that people can't drive forward and backward, and now you have like 360 degrees of access to drive in, like that always freaked me out.
Yeah. Right.
But I never thought about the sound thing, which was pretty brilliant. Because, and I guess it's just been in front of our face.
Well, then he also talked about, like it's easier to go.
Oh, it's less efficient.
You can go underground.
Yeah.
That's what was probably the impetus to be like, fuck this, I'm not going to build a flying car. Yeah. I'm just going to tunnel underground.
Right.
Because it's better to do it. It's
safer.
It's safer to do it that way. And then he started talking about the electric airplane and all this other stuff.
I love the part where he talks about how the tunnels underground would be like a snake.
Yeah.
And how it would move in an earthquake. That was pretty.
Yeah. So anyways, like a lot of knowledge dropped there. But the thing that really stood out to me was just, again, podcasting as a distribution platform for authentic, like raw, unedited content, like is the way to go,
Thanks for watching this clip, guys. Make sure you check out the full episode in our Tobe YouTube channel. You can hear the full episode there. Or if you just want to listen to the podcast, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, or anywhere you can find a podcast.